The city never really slept. Even late at night, lights stayed on in tall buildings. Cars moved like restless insects, and the sound of life never fully faded. Inside one of the biggest houses near the edge of the city, a young maid moved quietly from room to room. She walked softly, careful not to draw attention to herself. She had learned long ago that silence kept her safe. She woke up every day before sunrise. Her body felt heavy, but she forced herself up anyway. There was no time to rest, no space for weakness. She washed her face with cold water, tied her hair back, and put on her plain uniform. It hung a little looser than before, which helped hide the truth she carried. Beneath that simple cloth was a growing life, one she protected with fear and hope mixed together. No one in the house knew she was pregnant, or at least that was what she believed. She avoided mirrors, avoided long conversations, and avoided anything that could bring questions. Her hands often rested on her stomach when she was alone, as if reminding herself that she was not completely alone anymore. She worked in a large house owned by a very rich man. The house was beautiful, but cold. The floors shined, the furniture looked expensive, and every room smelled clean. Yet it never felt warm. People came and went, but real kindness was rare. Everyone followed strict rules. Mistakes were not forgiven easily. The owner of the house was rarely seen. When he was home, the air felt heavier. Staff members stood straighter and spoke less. He was known as a powerful man, busy with meetings, deals, and decisions that affected many lives. To most people, he was respected. To the staff, he was distant and frightening. The maid had been working there for several months. She was grateful for the job. Before this, life had been much harder. She had grown up in a poor home where money was always short and worries were always long. School ended early for her. Survival became more important than dreams. When she became pregnant, her world almost collapsed. The man who promised to stand by her disappeared the moment he heard the news. Her family, already struggling, turned their backs on her. They said she had brought shame. With no support and no money, she felt trapped. That was when she took the job as a maid. She didn't tell anyone about her condition. She told herself she would work until she couldn't anymore. Every day she counted the weeks, praying she would last long enough to save a little money. Her work was hard. She cleaned large rooms, washed heavy curtains, carried buckets of water, and stood for hours. Some days her legs shook. Some days her head spun, and the world felt blurry. But she never complained. Complaints were dangerous. Other staff members noticed her quiet nature. Some thought she was strange. Some thought she was weak. A few were kind, offering small smiles or short words of encouragement. But most people were too busy worrying about themselves. The house had many rules. Work had to be perfect. Time had to be respected. Any mistake could lead to warnings or worse, losing the job. For the maid, losing the job meant losing everything. At night, when her work was done, she lay on a thin mattress in a small room shared with other maids. While others slept, she stared at the ceiling. Her hand rested on her belly as she whispered soft promises to the unborn child. She promised safety, warmth, and a better life. Even though she didn't know how she would keep those promises, fear followed her everywhere. Fear of being discovered. Fear of being thrown out. Fear of giving birth alone. Yet alongside the fear was a quiet strength. Each day she survived felt like a small victory. One morning, she woke up feeling weaker than usual. Her back ached, and her stomach felt tight. She sat on the edge of the bed, breathing slowly, telling herself it would pass. She could not afford a day off. She forced herself to stand and went to work. As the hours passed, her movements became slower. She dropped a cleaning cloth and took longer than usual to pick it up. A supervisor noticed and frowned. "Move faster," the supervisor said sharply. The maid nodded and whispered an apology. Her face burned with shame, but she said nothing more. She bent down again, even though the motion sent pain through her body. As the day went on, whispers began. Some staff members noticed how pale she looked. Others noticed how often she paused to catch her breath. No one knew the full truth, but suspicion grew. By afternoon, her vision blurred again. The floor beneath her feet felt unstable. She tried to steady herself by holding onto a chair, but her grip slipped. Her heart raced. She told herself to stay strong. Just a little longer. Just finish this room. But her body had reached its limit. As she stepped forward, her legs gave way. The world tilted, sounds became distant, and then everything went dark. Her body collapsed onto the cold floor of the grand house. Shouts followed. Someone screamed for help. Others gathered around her, unsure of what to do. Some looked annoyed, others curious. Few looked worried. "She's pretending," one voice said. "She's always slow." Another voice argued. "She doesn't look well." The maid lay still, half-conscious, her hand instinctively moving toward her stomach. Fear filled her even in that moment. Fear not for herself, but for the life inside her. News of the incident moved quickly through the house. Messages were sent. Calls were made. The owner of the house was informed. He returned earlier than expected. As footsteps echoed through the hall, the atmosphere changed. Staff members stood back. Silence filled the room. The powerful man looked down at the maid lying on his floor. At first, his face showed irritation. Disruptions were not welcome in his world. "What happened?" he asked. Different voices answered at once. Some accused her of being careless. Some demanded she be removed. Others mentioned she might be sick. Then someone quietly said the words that changed everything. "She may be pregnant." The room fell silent. The maid's eyes slowly opened. She saw blurred shapes above her. Her heart pounded. Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes as fear overwhelmed her. She thought this was the end. She thought she had lost everything. She tried to speak, to explain, to beg, but no words came out. The powerful man looked at her more closely now. Not as a worker, not as a problem, but as a human being lying helpless on the floor. Something shifted, and for the first time since she stepped into that house, the maid felt that her fate might not be sealed just yet. The room stayed quiet for a long moment after the words were spoken. No one knew what to say next. The maid lay on the floor, her body weak, her mind spinning. She could hear voices, but could not understand them clearly. All she felt was fear. Fear that she would be shouted at. Fear that she would be dragged out of the house. Fear that this single moment had destroyed the only chance she had left. Someone brought water and gently placed a cloth on her forehead. It was one of the older workers, someone who had seen many things in that house. The maid tried to sit up, but her strength was gone. She whispered that she was sorry. Though she didn't know who she was apologizing to, the wealthy man stood there, listening. His expression was hard to read. He was used to problems being solved quickly. People rarely collapsed in front of him. Even more rarely did they make him uncomfortable. This situation did both. "Take her to a quiet room," he finally said. His voice was calm, not angry. That alone surprised everyone. Two female staff members helped the maid to her feet. Her legs trembled, and she leaned on them as they slowly walked her down the hall. Every step felt heavy. She expected harsh words behind her, but none came. Only silence. She was placed on a couch in a small guest room. The curtains were drawn to block the bright light. Someone placed a glass of water beside her. Her breathing slowly returned to normal, but her heart still raced. She knew she could not hide anymore. A short time later, the man entered the room alone. The door closed softly behind him. The maid tried to sit up straight, but he gently motioned for her to stay still. "How long?" he asked. She didn't understand at first. Then she realized he meant the pregnancy. She hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Several months? Why didn't you say anything?" Her eyes filled with tears. She looked down at her hands. "I was afraid. I need this job." He nodded slowly. He had heard many excuses in his life, but this did not sound like one. This sounded like survival. He asked more questions, not harshly, but directly. Where was her family? Was the child's father involved? Did she have anywhere else to go? She answered honestly. Her family had turned away. The father had disappeared. There was no one else. The room felt heavy with truth. For a moment, he said nothing. He stood by the window, looking outside. Cars passed, people moved, life continued. Inside that quiet room, a different kind of moment was happening. He thought of his own life, of success, money, power, of how many people worked under him every day, unseen and unheard. He had never thought much about their personal struggles. Perhaps he had chosen not to. "You should have been resting," he said finally. "Not working like this." She flinched, thinking this was the start of blame. But then he added, "You won't be doing heavy work anymore." She looked up in surprise. "Sir, you will see a doctor," he continued. "Today?" Her lips trembled. I can pay later." "I don't need— This is not a discussion," he said firmly, but not unkindly. Tears rolled down her face, not from fear this time, but from relief she did not expect. Outside the room, rumors spread fast. Some workers were shocked. Some were unhappy. A few whispered that she was being treated too well. Others worried that rules were being broken. "She hid something important," one said. "That's not allowed." Another replied, "She could have died." What kind of house would this be then? Opinions were divided. Later that day, the maid was taken to a clinic. It was the first time in months she had seen a doctor. The checkup confirmed that her body was exhausted, but the baby was still safe. She was told she needed rest, better food, and less stress. She listened carefully, holding back tears. Every word felt like a gift. When she returned to the house, she expected punishment or cold looks. Instead, she was told to rest for the remainder of the day. A simple meal was brought to her room. Warm food, clean water, small things that felt enormous to her. That night, she could not sleep. Her mind replayed everything that had happened. The collapse, the silence, the unexpected kindness. She wondered if it would last, or if it was only temporary. The next morning, changes were clear. She was assigned lighter duties. No heavy lifting. No long hours on her feet. Some staff members stared. Some avoided her. A few smiled softly. The supervisor who once scolded her said nothing. The man of the house watched quietly from a distance. He did not speak to her again that day, but he made sure the instructions were followed. He did not announce his reasons. He did not explain himself to anyone days past. The maid slowly regained strength. She still moved carefully, still kept her head down, but fear no longer controlled every breath. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen, yet not everyone was pleased. Some believed she was receiving special treatment. Rumors grew sharper. Whispers turned into quiet resentment. People questioned her character, her past, her worth. She heard the whispers and felt the weight of them. At night, the old fears returned. She worried she was causing trouble. She worried she might still be sent away. One evening, she stood alone by a window in the hallway, looking out at the city lights. She thought about how close she had been to losing everything, how quickly life could change. Behind her, footsteps approached. She turned, startled, and found the man standing there. "You should be resting," he said. She nodded. "I was just going back." He looked at her carefully, then spoke in a quieter voice. "You are not in danger here." Those words settled into her heart slowly, like warmth after a long cold night. She bowed her head slightly. "Thank you," gave a small nod and walked away. She stood there for a moment longer, one hand resting on her stomach. For the first time since she discovered she was pregnant, she allowed herself to imagine a future that did not end in fear. But even as hope began to grow, she sensed that challenges were still ahead. Kindness often invites resistance. Not everyone in that house was ready to accept what compassion could change. The danger had not fully passed. It had only taken a different shape. Days turned into weeks. The maid followed the instructions carefully, taking time to rest, eating nutritious meals, and attending regular checkups. The baby grew steadily inside her, and with each day she felt more connected to the tiny life she carried. Yet the shadows of doubt and fear still lingered. Even in a house that showed signs of care, not everyone was supportive. And she could feel the silent judgments. The man of the house continued to watch from a distance. He did not interfere directly with her work anymore, but he ensured she was protected. Staff members who once disrespected her were now careful. They could not act harshly without him noticing. His presence, though unseen at times, created a barrier between her and the potential cruelty around her. One afternoon, she was asked to deliver some documents to the office. It was an easy task, but the hallways seemed longer than ever. Her steps were slow, her breath steady but deliberate. As she approached the office door, she felt a sudden wave of dizziness. Her hand went to her stomach, holding it protectively. A voice called her name, soft but firm. She looked up and saw one of the senior staff members, the kind older worker who had first helped her when she collapsed. They walked toward her quickly, worry etched on their face. "Sit down," the worker said gently. "You need to rest before you move any further." She obeyed, sitting on a nearby bench. The world around her seemed to tilt slightly, but the reassuring presence beside her steadied her. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking deep breaths, trying to regain composure. "You've been working hard, more than you should," the worker said quietly. "Do you have enough support?" I have him," she said softly, referring to the man of the house. She did not know why she spoke it aloud, but the words felt necessary. "He ensures I am safe." The older worker nodded. "It's good that someone cares. But you must care for yourself too." She smiled weakly. "I try." The day passed slowly. She returned to her room, her body tired, yet her mind restless. She thought about the man. The one who had not only protected her, but had shown her a form of compassion she had never experienced before. In a world filled with rules and harsh realities, his actions felt almost impossible to believe, but the quiet moments of reflection were interrupted by whispers in the hallways. Some staff members had started openly discussing her presence and condition. They speculated about why the man of the house was showing special attention. Some were curious, some were envious, and some were openly hostile. "She's pretending," one worker muttered. "It's a trick to get favors." "She's always been sneaky," another added. "Do you think she's telling the truth?" The maid heard fragments of the conversation as she walked down the hallway the next day. Her chest tightened, but she refused to confront them. She knew that doing so could lead to trouble. Instead, she walked quietly, keeping her head down, and continued with her work. Her duties were adjusted to protect her physical health, but she was still expected to maintain standards. She dusted rooms, arranged flowers, organized shelves, and served meals. Her work was no longer exhausting, but it was still constant. One evening, the man of the house approached her room again. He carried a small package wrapped in brown paper. "This is for you," he said simply, placing it on the table beside her. She hesitated, then unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a bundle of clothing, soft and comfortable, clearly chosen to fit her changing body. There was also a note, short and direct, where these, "Take care of yourself." Her eyes filled with tears. She did not know why this simple gesture affected her so deeply. Perhaps it was the acknowledgement of her existence, the recognition that she mattered. For years, she had lived in a world where she was invisible. Yet here someone had seen her needs without being asked. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded and turned to leave, but then paused. "You must know," he said slowly. "Life is not easy, but that does not mean you deserve hardship unnecessarily. Protect yourself. The child, too." She nodded again, holding the words close. As days passed, the household began to adjust to her presence in a new way. Some staff members softened, offering help without being asked. Others kept their distance, wary of upsetting the balance of authority. The maid learned to navigate this carefully. She accepted kindness when offered, but she did not rely on it entirely. One afternoon, a new challenge arrived. A delivery was scheduled for the house, and it required moving large boxes. The maid was instructed to supervise, but not to lift anything herself. She watched as workers struggled with the packages. Noticing how quickly tempers flared when things went wrong, she stepped in quietly when mistakes happened, offering calm instructions. Her voice, soft but firm, guided the workers through the task. Surprisingly, her presence was respected. Perhaps it was the patience she displayed, or perhaps the knowledge that the man of the house had placed her there. Either way, she found a small sense of accomplishment in the control she could exercise without physical strength. That evening, she sat alone in her room, reflecting on the strange twists of her life. Just months ago, she had been abandoned, alone, with no hope for support. Now, she was being cared for, protected, and even guided. Yet the shadow of doubt remained. People outside her room still whispered. She still feared judgment, still feared that her position was precarious. A soft knock at the door broke her thoughts. It was the man of the house. He entered quietly, holding a small box of food. "I thought you might like this," he said. "Fresh fruit, protein, things the doctor recommended." She accepted it gratefully. "Thank you," she said again. He did not stay long. As he left, she noticed something different in his gaze and expression that was not just authority, but concern. It was subtle, easily overlooked by others, but she saw it. Days turned into weeks. The maid's body grew heavier, her movements slower, but her strength of mind increased. She found moments to sit quietly, to imagine the future, and to hope. The baby inside her seemed to respond to her calm voice, tiny movements that reminded her she was not alone. Outside the small bubble of care, life continued as it always had. The city buzzed, the world moved on, and people in the house adjusted to the changes around them. Yet, the maid realized she was building something new, an invisible thread of security. It's a fragile but growing sense of belonging. One morning, she received news that a distant relative wanted to see her. Fear gripped her heart. Past betrayals had taught her that family could be cruel. She worried that old wounds might open again. But she also knew that avoiding her past would not make it disappear. The man of the house noticed her hesitation. He approached her quietly and asked, "Do you want me to be there?" She considered it. She had grown used to his quiet support. In that moment, she realized that facing her fears with him by her side might change the outcome. "Yes," she said finally. "Please." Together, they prepared. She dressed carefully in the clothing he had provided, the soft fabrics making her feel safer than she had in months. He offered quiet advice and walked beside her, a silent presence of protection. When she met her relative, emotions ran high. Questions were asked, judgments whispered, but with the man's quiet support, she managed to navigate the encounter without collapsing into fear. She realized that strength could come in many forms, sometimes in muscles, sometimes in support, sometimes in trust. The day ended with relief. She returned to the house, exhausted but proud. She had faced a piece of her past and survived. That night, lying on her bed, she thought about how far she had come. From fear and abandonment to safety and care, her life had shifted in ways she never imagined. And though challenges remained, she began to understand that hope, even fragile, could be enough to carry a person through the hardest times. Weeks passed. The maid began to notice subtle changes in herself. Her body was heavier now, and simple tasks required more effort, but she also felt stronger in her mind. Each day brought new challenges, yet she was learning to meet them with quiet resilience. She had survived the initial fears, the collapse, the whispers, and even confronting her past. Now she faced the delicate balance of preparing for motherhood in a world that still held uncertainties. The billionaire continued to watch over her, though not directly. He ensured that her health was prioritized, that her rest was respected, and that no one in the house interfered with her safety. Some staff members still questioned his decisions, but the power he held kept them silent. They could not argue openly, and most avoided showing hostility in his presence. One afternoon, she was asked to help organize a small charity event hosted in the house. It involved preparing guest rooms, arranging flowers, and assisting in the kitchen. She hesitated at first, knowing her condition limited her strength, but the event could not proceed without her careful guidance. She worked slowly, moving cautiously, instructing others where to place items, what to prepare, and how to maintain the quality of presentation. She noticed the workers listening closely, respecting her direction. In this small way, she felt a sense of purpose that had been absent for months. During a short break, she sat near the window and watched the city below. The streets were alive with people, each carrying their own worries, joys, and struggles. She wondered how many people were like her, trying to survive in silence, hoping someone would notice them without asking. The thought made her heart ache and warmed it at the same time. She had been invisible for so long, yet here she was slowly gaining recognition. Not for her mistakes, but for her humanity. The event went smoothly, thanks largely to her careful supervision. Guests commented on the beautiful arrangements, the spotless rooms, and the welcoming atmosphere. Though she stayed mostly behind the scenes, a few noticed her gentle smile and quiet efficiency. It was a small victory, a sign that she could contribute meaningfully without overexerting herself. That night, she rested. She thought about the baby growing inside her. She traced her hand over her belly, feeling the subtle movements that reminded her of life and hope. Every kick and flutter was a message, a sign that she was not alone. She whispered promises of love, safety, and protection, knowing that one day, these words would form the foundation of a new life. The next day, the man of the house entered her room unexpectedly. He did not usually interrupt her rest, but his presence today was different. He carried a small notebook and pen, placing them gently on her table. "I thought you might like to record your thoughts," he said quietly. "Write down your experiences, hopes, and anything you want to remember." She looked at him, surprised. She had never considered writing her thoughts, not even for herself. The offer felt like an invitation to acknowledge her own life, her own feelings, and her own story. "I don't know if I can," she admitted. "Start small," he suggested. "Even a few words a day. It can help you process everything." She nodded slowly, touched by his thoughtfulness. That evening, she began writing in the small notebook. At first, it was simple. Her daily routines, her meals, the baby's movements. Gradually, she allowed herself to write more her fears, her dreams, and even her gratitude. Writing became a quiet act of healing, a way to claim her identity beyond the walls of the house. Days turned into weeks, and the maid noticed more interactions with the billionaire. Not in the form of commands or supervision, but small gestures of care, a warm meal delivered, a gentle reminder to rest, or a quiet presence when she needed reassurance. She realized that he understood the fragility of her situation, and he acted with subtle compassion that spoke louder than words. Yet life was not without new challenges. Some staff members still murmured behind her back, plotting small inconveniences. They moved her belongings slightly out of place, whispered false information, and tried to test her patience. She ignored most of it, but the awareness never left her mind. She knew she had to be cautious, balancing her safety with the need to maintain dignity. One afternoon, while resting in her room, she heard a commotion outside. Voices were raised, and the sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the hallways. Curious but wary, she peeked through the door. A young maid had made a mistake in the kitchen, spilling a tray of dishes. The senior staff member shouted loudly, causing the girl to freeze in fear. The pregnant maid felt a rush of empathy. She remembered her own collapse, the fear and the helplessness she had experienced. She stepped out carefully, her presence calm and steady. "Everyone makes mistakes," she said softly. "We fix them and move on. Shouting doesn't help." The room went quiet. People looked at her in surprise. Even the senior staff member paused, caught off guard by the calm authority in her voice. Slowly, they nodded and began to clean up without harsh words. The act did not go unnoticed. Some staff members whispered in approval, others in disbelief. The pregnant maid realized that kindness, even in small doses, could change the energy of a place. That evening, the man of the house visited her room. He had observed the incident quietly from a distance. He did not comment on her actions verbally, but his expression held something she could not quite name. Respect, perhaps, or acknowledgement. She watched him leave and felt a surge of confidence. She was learning that strength came in many forms, not just physical, but emotional, moral, and compassionate. She began to understand her own resilience, her ability to face adversity, and the importance of protecting both herself and her unborn child. As weeks passed, she continued to grow stronger, both in body and spirit. The baby's movements became more pronounced, reminding her daily of the life she carried and the future she would protect. The house, once a place of fear, now felt like a fragile sanctuary. She still moved cautiously, aware of potential dangers. But she also allowed herself moments of hope and quiet joy. One morning, the billionaire called her to his office. She approached with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. He gestured for her to sit. "I want to ensure you are prepared," he said. "Not just for the baby, but for life beyond these walls. You will need skills, knowledge, and confidence to thrive." He outlined a plan for her education, offering tutors for reading, writing, and other skills that would help her in the future. He explained that he wanted her to be self-sufficient, capable, and empowered. She listened carefully, overwhelmed by the generosity and foresight of his offer. Tears filled her eyes. She had never imagined that someone could care so deeply, not only for her safety, but for her growth as a person. She nodded, grateful beyond words. From that day on, her routine included lessons, time for rest, and continued guidance from the billionaire. She learned to balance her health, her responsibilities, and her education. The notebook she kept grew thick with thoughts, reflections, and plans for the future. Though challenges remained, the whispers, the judgments, and the fear of the unknown, the maid began to envision a life filled with hope. The baby she carried became a symbol of possibility, a reminder that life could change, even in the harshest circumstances. As she lay down each night, she placed her hand over her belly, feeling the tiny movements that reassured her. She whispered promises of love, protection, and guidance, knowing that each day brought her closer to the moment when she would hold her child for the first time. And in the quiet, unseen corners of the grand house, she began to believe that compassion, courage, and resilience could indeed alter fate. The final months of her pregnancy arrived quietly, but with a sense of anticipation. Each day brought new sensations, a deeper connection to the life growing within her, and a growing understanding of the strength she had discovered in herself. She moved carefully, taking breaks often, following the instructions of doctors and caregivers, and listening to the subtle advice the billionaire offered without directly imposing on her life. The house, once a place filled with whispers and suspicion, had shifted. Many staff members had begun to respect her presence, noticing her calm authority, the patience she exhibited, and the quiet strength that seemed to grow with each day. A few remained distant or skeptical, but they no longer interfered. The atmosphere had changed because she had changed, and the support from the billionaire had reinforced that change. One morning, she woke feeling stronger than usual. The baby was active, her body adjusted to the weight and demands of the final stages of pregnancy, and she felt a sense of purpose that carried her through each task. She looked around her simple room, the small table with her notebook, and the bundle of clothes that had been given to her. They represented not just comfort, but care and recognition of her humanity. The day passed with a sense of calm productivity. She guided the staff through light tasks, checked preparations for the upcoming events in the house, and maintained her personal routine. There were moments of fatigue, of course, but she had learned to rest without guilt, to accept support without feeling weak, and to balance her needs with the expectations of those around her. One afternoon, the billionaire requested a private meeting. She approached his office with a mixture of curiosity and respect. He gestured for her to sit, his expression calm but focused. "I want to discuss the future," he began. "Not just for the baby, but for you. I want you to have choices, opportunities, and security beyond these walls. You have shown resilience, intelligence, and care. I want to ensure that continues." She listened intently, absorbing his words. He outlined plans for continued education, support for the baby, and opportunities for self-reliance. He spoke of potential jobs, investments in skills, and guidance in making decisions for herself and her child. Every word was deliberate, practical, and filled with genuine concern. Tears filled her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of care, not obligation, not expectation, but genuine concern for her well-being and the life she carried. She nodded, unable to find words that could fully express gratitude. The days that followed were filled with preparation. The house staff helped her adjust rooms for comfort, arranging bedding, providing nutritious meals, and ensuring she had everything she needed. Even the skeptics in the staff showed a quiet respect. Realizing that the billionaire's attention was unwavering and that resistance was futile, she spent time writing in her notebook, documenting thoughts, experiences, fears, and hopes. Each page became a record, not just of survival, but of transformation. She wrote about her initial fear, the collapse that brought attention to her situation, the slow unfolding of kindness, and the lessons she had learned about resilience and human compassion. She wrote about the baby, the dreams she held, and the life she wanted to create. The day of labor arrived quietly. She felt the first signs in the early morning, a mix of pain, anticipation, and adrenaline. The staff moved quickly but gently, assisting her with care and precision. She had prepared for this moment, and yet nothing could fully ready her for the intensity of it. The billionaire was present, though not in the center of the room. He had arranged everything to ensure she had privacy, support, and immediate medical attention. He stayed at a respectful distance, allowing the staff and doctors to guide her through the process, stepping in only when necessary. His presence was a silent reassurance, a symbol that she was not alone. Hours passed in labor. She gritted her teeth, focused on breathing, and reminded herself of the strength she had discovered over the past months. Each contraction was a test of endurance, a reminder of the life she carried and the responsibility she now held. She felt fear, pain, and doubt, but they were tempered by the knowledge that she had survived worse, that she had been nurtured, and that she had support. Finally, with a final push and a cry that filled the quiet room, her child entered the world. The baby was healthy, small, but strong, and the first moments were filled with relief, joy, and tears. She held the child close, feeling warmth and love that was both instinctive and overwhelming. The room was silent except for the soft cries of the newborn and the quiet movements of the staff ensuring everything was perfect. The billionaire approached, his expression soft yet careful. He did not speak at first, simply observing the connection between mother and child. When he finally spoke, it was with quiet respect. "You've done well," he said. "Both of you." She looked up, tears streaming down her face, and whispered words of gratitude that felt too small for the enormity of the moment. She had survived, nurtured life, and found protection and compassion where she least expected it. The weeks that followed were filled with adjustment. She learned to care for the baby, balancing her own recovery with the needs of her child. The house staff supported her, providing meals, assistance, and respect. The billionaire continued his quiet oversight, ensuring safety, comfort, and opportunities for the future. The maid found strength in the routines of motherhood. Each day was a mixture of sleepless nights, tender moments, and small victories. She wrote daily in her notebook, documenting the growth of her child, the changes in herself, and the lessons she continued to learn about resilience, empathy, and hope. Months later, she had recovered physically, her child thriving beside her. She had begun lessons again, guided by tutors arranged by the billionaire, learning skills that would allow her to live independently and confidently. She was no longer just a worker in the house. She had become a woman with knowledge, skill, and a clear sense of purpose. The staff had adapted as well. Many treated her with respect, recognizing the journey she had endured and the strength she now exhibited. Some had shifted from doubt to admiration, understanding that kindness, courage, and persistence could transform perceptions and relationships. The billionaire, though rarely overtly involved, remained a steady presence. He provided guidance, support, and protection without imposing control. His approach was subtle but effective, ensuring she was empowered, not dependent. One evening, as she sat by the window with her child sleeping beside her, she reflected on the journey. From fear and abandonment to survival, compassion and growth, her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. She had faced danger, uncertainty, and doubt. Yet she had emerged stronger, nurtured, and capable. Her thoughts turned to the future. She envisioned a life where she could provide for her child, pursue education, and continue to grow. She imagined a world where kindness and resilience could coexist, where people could find support even in unexpected places, and where hope could transform lives. She knew challenges would still come, but she had learned that strength was not just in muscles, but in courage, empathy, and the willingness to accept help. She had discovered her own power to survive, nurture, and thrive. As night settled over the city, she held her child close, feeling warmth, love, and a quiet certainty that the future was no longer something to fear. She had faced the storm, found shelter in compassion, and now, with her child beside her, she stepped into a life filled with hope, strength, and possibility. Her story, once filled with fear and uncertainty, had transformed into one of survival, resilience, and the profound impact of kindness. And in that transformation, she had discovered not just safety, but a life worth living, a child worth loving, and a future worth building. Months passed since the birth of her child, and the maid had slowly settled into a rhythm that balanced motherhood, work, and self-growth. Each day brought new lessons, challenges, and joys. The baby was growing healthy and strong, responding to her care and love. The small house, once a place of fear and judgment, now felt more like a home. It was filled with warmth, quiet understanding, and the subtle yet constant support of the billionaire who had changed the course of her life. Her days began early. She woke before dawn, not out of fear or necessity as before, but because of a newfound sense of responsibility and purpose. She prepared herself and the baby for the day, ensuring that both had nourishment, comfort, and readiness for whatever the hours might bring. The weight of responsibility no longer felt suffocating. Instead, it fueled her determination. The staff had adapted to her role as both a caregiver and a guide. Some respected her quietly. Others had grown to admire the calm strength she now exhibited. Occasionally, there were still whispers or subtle challenges, but they had lost their power over her. The respect she had earned was firm and based on experience, compassion, and resilience rather than fear. The billionaire continued to watch from a distance, providing support where needed, but allowing her to exercise independence. He had arranged tutors for her education, sessions for financial literacy, and opportunities to develop skills that would serve her beyond the walls of the house. She studied diligently, geared to equip herself for a future where she could make her own choices. One morning, she was asked to assist with planning a larger charitable event hosted in the house. This required coordination with multiple staff members, arranging donations, and managing logistics. She approached the task with careful planning and patience. Though her body still felt the occasional strain, her mind was sharp, and her organizational skills had grown stronger than ever. During the preparations, she noticed a young maid struggling to lift a heavy box. Memories of her own early days flashed before her eyes, the fear, the exhaustion, the lack of support. She stepped forward and offered guidance, showing the young girl how to handle the task safely. Her calm voice and gentle instructions brought reassurance, and the task was completed efficiently. Witnessing her help others brought her a deep sense of fulfillment. She realized that her journey was no longer only about survival. It was about guiding and protecting others, just as she had been protected and guided. She felt a growing responsibility to create a space where kindness could thrive, even in a place once dominated by strict rules and judgment. After the event, preparations were complete. The billionaire approached her office quietly. He had been observing the process, noting how she had handled challenges and interacted with others. "You have changed the environment here," he said softly. "Your influence is subtle, but it is there. People respond to your calm strength and guidance." She felt a warmth in her chest, a quiet validation of all she had endured and accomplished. "Thank you," she replied. "I have learned a lot, and I want to continue helping wherever I can." He nodded, then handed her a small envelope. "This is for you. Consider it a start for the future you are building." Inside was a sum of money saved and invested in her name. It was more than she had ever imagined having, enough to secure her child's future and provide options for her own independence. She was overwhelmed with gratitude, but also with a sense of responsibility. This gift was more than wealth, it was trust and empowerment. Weeks turned into months. The maid continued to study, work, and care for her child. She learned not just skills for employment, but also life skills, how to manage finances, communicate effectively, and make decisions confidently. Each lesson strengthened her belief that she could thrive independently, that she could create a safe and stable life for herself and her child. The baby, now more active and aware, brought joy and laughter into her days. She spent hours playing, reading, and exploring the world together, noticing the small details, the first smile, the first step, the tiny fingers gripping hers. Each moment reinforced her determination to protect and nurture, to ensure that this child would know love, security, and hope. One afternoon, the billionaire asked to meet her privately. He had noticed her growth, the way she carried herself, the balance she had achieved between her responsibilities and personal development. "You are ready for more," he said. "Not just within this house, but outside. There are opportunities for you to expand your skills, meet others, and explore your potential. I want to support you in taking those steps." She listened carefully, feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The idea of stepping beyond the walls that had sheltered her was daunting, but the thought of independence, choice, and empowerment was equally compelling. "I am ready," she said finally. "I want to learn, grow, and create a life for my child where fear does not hold us back." He smiled, a quiet approval in his eyes. "Then we will begin planning, step by step. You will not be alone." In the following weeks, they organized small trips to the city, exposure to environments she had never experienced before, and meetings with professionals who could provide guidance and mentorship. Each experience was carefully structured to build confidence, knowledge, and resilience. She began to see a world beyond her fears. Beyond the limitations she had once believed were permanent, the staff continued to adapt, gradually accepting the changes she brought. Some began seeking her advice, others respected her guidance, and a few even shared stories of their own struggles, finding comfort in her understanding and empathy. The house, once filled with whispers of judgment, was slowly transforming into a community where respect and care could exist alongside discipline and order. One evening, she sat with her child by the window, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, a reminder of beauty and hope even after darkness. She held the baby close, feeling the gentle rhythm of life and the promise of a future built on care, resilience, and compassion. As she reflected on the journey, she realized how far she had come. From fear and abandonment to survival, care, and empowerment, her life had been transformed by unexpected kindness, guidance, and her own determination. She had learned that strength was not only physical, but emotional and moral. She had discovered that compassion could change not only her fate, but the lives of those around her. The billionaire, observing from a distance, had played a quiet but significant role. He had not imposed control or made demands. He had offered support, opportunities, and protection, allowing her to grow into her own power. She recognized his influence not as dominance but as facilitation, catalyst for her transformation. Months turned into a year. The maid had grown more confident, independent, and capable. She had developed a network of support, skills for financial independence, the knowledge needed to navigate the world outside the house. Her child thrived, surrounded by love, care, and stability. The journey had not been easy. There were moments of fear, exhaustion, and doubt. There were whispers of judgment and challenges from those who could not see beyond appearances. Yet, through each trial, she had persevered, finding strength in herself, support in unexpected places, and hope for the future in the quiet moments. She often reflected on her story: the collapse in the hallway, the compassionate intervention, the small acts of care, and the opportunities that had been extended to her. She realized that her life had been forever changed, not just by luck, but by human kindness, resilience, and the courage to embrace change. As she held her child, looking out at the city lights, she whispered promises once again of protection, love, and guidance. She knew that the road ahead would still have challenges, but she also knew that she was ready. Ready to face the world, ready to nurture her child, and ready to continue building a life filled with hope, dignity, and strength. And in that quiet strength, in the bond between mother and child, and in the subtle yet profound impact of compassion and guidance, she discovered a truth that would carry her forward, that even in the darkest times, hope, courage, and kindness could change lives, shape futures, and transform destinies.